Far over the misty mountains old. Welcome to the Hardcover Hooligans podcast. My name is Mac. As always, I am with Danylo. Danylo, I have a question for you.
Ask away, Mac.
Without looking it up, can you name all the dwarves?
Oh, damn. Okay. Thorin.
Yep.
Philly.
Yep.
Killy.
Yep.
Bomber. That's all I got. And then a bunch of more. Then they all rhyme, and then I'm done.
True. That's true. There are 14 is their company to make Bilbo Baggins the lucky number, meaning that they don't have to leave us 13. Folks, the more keen-eared of you, elfin-eared of you may have noticed we are talking about The Hobbit, or There and Back Again by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, Danylo, I am very familiar with this world and this fiction. What is your relationship to Mr. Tolkien?
Well, I've seen the movies, and I was aware of them from a young age, and I watched them, and I enjoyed them. In my mind, they were always like adult movies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And growing up in a Catholic school, there were a lot of Catholic nerds who were really into Lord of the Rings. I think that stems from, Tolkien being very Catholic. Sort of it. I think the intense Catholic families, it was okay because
I see. So
he was Catholic.
Yeah, but I mean, those movies aren't very Catholic. they're chopping heads off and fucking people up. They're more into Lord of the Rings than the Chronicles of Narnia.
I think more Chronicles of Narnia is more like of elementary school thing, and then I think people grow out of Chronicles of Narnia and then move into Lord of the Rings. That was my read as someone who was aware of them and generally liked them, but not a huge nerd of them. That's my read on it. Right.
Well, The Hobbit by one J.R.R. Tolkien, released September 21st, 1937. So post-World War I, pre-World War II for all you history buffs out there. Chronicles the adventures of one Bilbo Baggins and his journey. Sorry,
which is a crazy long time ago, if you think. That's crazy.
Yeah, almost 100 years ago.
Yeah, that's wild.
Which it doesn't feel like it. I mean, reading this book feels pretty modern,
or timeless almost.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Well, listen, I mean, this is I don't know how much background I could, we could spend all day talking about the history and publication of this book, but everybody knows.
At least
everybody's
knows about
seen the Tolkien movie that came out in 2015 or whatever.
There's a short guy and he has a ring. I mean, what else do you need to know?
Yeah, come on. Well, I suppose we should just jump right in. And what better way to begin a book than talking about a book than with the beginning?
Now, we talked about this. Did you write a little summary?
Oh, I did. Yes, I do have mine here. It is very short.
Mine is fairly long, but also kind of facetious. So that it's kind of fun. I don't know.
I'll let you go first because mine is only...
You should go first.
I've written here, the primary lesson I learned from The Hobbit is this. Always be honest when giving someone a riddle. If you don't, the devil will find where you live and frustrate your neighbors with questions. Which does, that happens late in a different book, but it all comes from being dishonest during a riddle game, if you get down to it.
Mm-hmm. I have a pretty long, I feel like it's pretty thorough.
Oh, good, yeah.
Summary. In the faraway land of England, Bilbo Baggins, a member of the wealthy landed gentry, is struggling with a mental illness that runs in his family. This mental illness leads him to think about maybe one day leaving town. One day, an old man and 13 trust fund frat bros come up and exploit Bilbo's mental illness and drag him into their scheme to get a bunch of their dad's money back. These frat bros have no plan and no skills. They start off on their road trip where at every turn they are saved by either An Old Man, or When the Old Man Isn't There by Bilbo. There's a couple of vanilla D&D encounters with goblins, a druid, some spiders, some elves, and some humans. During this journey, Bilbo steals a piece of jewelry from a homeless man by tricking him with wordplay. Against the odds, these frat bros get to their dad's cache and find out a dragon is guarding it. They don't know what to do about that, since they had not thought this far ahead. Luckily, the dragon flies away and gets killed by some other people, so it turns out it was good they didn't stress out too much about it. Now they have their dad's money, but it turns out that the people who killed the dragon want some too. The frat bros think this is dumb because finders keepers. Then all the goblins in the world show up, and everyone hates goblins, so they all do a quick goblin genocide and decide then, we all work together pretty well, actually. Let's be friends. And then everyone gets along, and Bilbo goes back to England to live happily ever after.
It's true. It's true. I gotta tell you, Danylo, that's pretty spot on. Thinking of the dwarves as frat bros is pretty funny. They're pretty rude. They're pretty rude right off the jump to Bilbo Baggins.
There was at some point I'm like, they've not done anything and have no plan.
Yeah, they don't. They don't have a plan. All right. Well, that was lovely. So let's start at the beginning. We've got our main character, one Bilbo Baggins, who lives in a comfortable hole at Bag End. Danylo, would you like to describe what a hobbit hole is for those who maybe have no idea what the hell any of this means?
Yeah, well, it's it's not like a regular hole in the ground with worms and grubs and dirt.
Oh. No, of course not.
It's a nice house built into a hill.
Yeah. With a big green
round
door.
Walls, big green door with a knob in the middle. It feels very comfy and homely, and there's always food and always comfort, and no one has to do anything unpleasant.
But one day, unfortunately, Bilbo Baggins, just drinking tea or dreaming of eggs and bacon or whatever it is hobbits do. There's a rap at the door, and an old creep is there, and his name is Gandalf. And you may be familiar with Gandalf. When you were a child, you may have mixed up Gandalf and Dumbledore. Wrong, which is wrong because wrong, because one of them is way cooler. And Gandalf essentially shows up and is like, do you want to do gig labor for money I'll give you later? And Bilbo says no way, and he shuts the door. Yeah, just for fun.
You might die.
What you've got to know is, hobbits they don't ever leave the Shire. They don't ever, Hobbiton in this case, but they don't ever leave. Like, people don't know what hobbits are because they don't ever leave.
Yeah, they're
just
like
hang out
super. They're just chill all the time. They never want to do anything. They just want to eat food and relax.
Which is, intimately relatable. I love it. So the next day, Bilbo wakes up to a knock at the door, and it's not Gandalf. It's 13 consecutive weirdos who just sort of come into his house and start eating all his food and demanding a certain beer. Like, he's prepared coffee for one person, and now he has to get all the beer and wine out of his cellar. And very frustrating. Something I hope that none of us will ever have to experience in our lifetime.
I don't have enough food for 13 people in my house.
No. But we meet 13 dwarves, and none of them are important except for one, Thorin Oakenshield.
I would argue that two. Well, Thorin was the leader, and Bomber, who was fat.
Oh, yes. yes.
Those are the only two you need to differentiate.
Yeah. And Balin, he's like, well, I guess you also need to know Fili and Kili because they die at the end. Spoiler alert.
Well, and Balin, becomes Bilbo's friend. It's crazy you can go on an adventure across the world, and at every turn, the dwarves kind of okay, what's this guy doing here? He's like, you invited me.
They keep doing it. Well, they've done it under false pretenses. Gandalf has told the dwarves, Thorin, son of Thrain, son of Thror, yada yada yada.
King under the mountain. Yeah.
Has been lied to by a wizard for no reason other than Gandalf wants to be mischievous.
Gandalf's bored, basically. I didn't know, or I guess I didn't put together that like Gandalf explicitly lied to them about the quest. Wait, what did he say? I always thought
I mean, lied about Bilbo. He's like, he's a great burglar. Like, and he's gonna do it. And it's just like Bilbo's never left his house ever. Like, he's not a good burglar.
Like, what if I got this total loser to go with them? Would that be funny?
Yeah. And so, they're sitting around eating food and singing a funny song about the dishes, and when it gets down to brass tacks, the plan is that these dwarves, Thorin is the rightful king under the mountain of the Lonely Mountain, Erebor. And
is it called Erebor? Was that ever mentioned in this novel?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's not mentioned in the book. But hang on, let me just make sure I'm right about that. Yeah, that's the Lonely Mountain is Erebor. They don't ever say Erebor. They say Esgaroth, which is the original name of Lake Town.
Right, I picked up on that.
But no, Erebor I think is mentioned in the next one. Okay. Fellowship of the Ring. The Lonely Mountain. Anyway, he's the rightful king. A dragon. I don't think the dragon gets name dropped yet, but it's Smaug. That's his name. Came and ate everybody and claimed all the gold in the mountain for themselves. So the grand plan is that they're gonna burgle all of the gold out of the mountain.
I think they haven't even thought. They get there and they're like, now what?
Right. Well, they need a burglar. The plan has to be that they're going to steal all the gold back. Like, that's the only way it makes sense in my head. But
we're going to take one guy to steal all the gold back.
Yeah, I don't know, like, and, to Bilbo's credit, he doesn't go along with this ruse. He's like, I'm no burglar, I just live here. I just work here, man. But
you ate all my
like,
food.
No.
I mean,
yeah.
Can I get paid back for this? It's like, if you walk with us to the mountain with the dragon, you can get all the money you want.
Yeah, he'll get 1/14th share of a mystery amount of money, which, dwarves mine. Presumably they'd have a lot of gold, but we don't know this for sure. Thorin could be lying. All he has is a key. And
they'll cover all of Bilbo's funeral expenses in the event
That's
that
true.
he
I
passes
did forget
away.
about that, which is pretty funny, but also, like, that's a lie. They're not carting his corpse all the way back to the Shire.
Yeah, they're burying. They barely cared about Bomber, one of like their own dwarves. If Bilbo like disappeared and was dead, they would have been like, oh well.
But this is all like Gandalf is like, no, there's more to him than you think, and you got to remember it's a children's book. It's like you can be. Yeah. It's like if Bilbo Baggins could do it, you, child, can also be like a hero in your everyday life. Like there's more to you than meets the eye too, which I think is really, especially by the end of this book, is a really powerful message. And I think it's effective because I think Bilbo is never not scared. He's just like, I just got to get over it.
He's like, I have to do this. I have to figure it out, and I'm gonna be brave and do it. And then he does it, and it's good.
Right. Danylo, do you have anything else to say about an unexpected party?
I was a little stressed out for Bilbo, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I've read this before, and I was like, man, poor Bilbo.
If only he knew. He's got no clue what's coming. It's funny, though, and we could talk more about this at the end when we've covered everything, but it's pretty funny to think, like, the scale of this adventure versus the scale of the adventure that J.R.R. Tolkien writes next. Mm-hmm. It's been described, I saw this, like, there's this viral tweet, it's something to the effect of, like, the Hobbit is like Stuart Little, but if E.B. White then wrote a book about how Stuart Little's nephew tried to kill the devil. Which is, that is true.
I've seen that before, and that's I was thinking about that the whole time reading this.
Yeah. So through one reason or another, coercion, let's say, and the tookish part of Bilbo Baggins' imagination, he does decide to go with them. Which leads them, they just kind of like wander around in the woods, and like Gandalf disappears, and then Gandalf's back, and
it's a D&D campaign.
Yeah, it is. So this is a travel episode until they get to their first encounter, which is, of course, with Bill, Bert, and Tom.
I love these guys.
Oh yeah, these are three goofy guys. Danilo, do you want to explain? I just said the names, but
Yeah, Bill, Bert, and Tom. The trolls. And
Right.
they run into these trolls, and Bilbo almost gets eaten, but Gandalf shows up and just talks to them all night long until the sun goes up and all the trolls turn to stone. And then they rob the trolls and get some badass swords.
yeah, they do. Is that like an English folklore thing that trolls turn to stone?
It must be. One of the things I kept trying to keep in mind the whole time reading this was like this is where it all comes from sort of thing. Like, this is where we have the stereotypes of dwarves like rocks and mine, and like the elves live in the woods, and like all that stuff, which is kind of blows your mind to think about, where you're reading it and it feels so stereotypical, but remembering, this is like where the stereotypes come from.
Right, like the specificity of the stereotypes, right? Because it's like in like English folklore, they had like the fairies who would like live in the forest, but it's like no, these like tall regal elves who like
there was no like cohesive like everyone talked about elves the same way, or everyone talked about dwarves the same way, and they'll like treasure,
yeah, which I think is there's a lot of stereotypical stuff in this, but it's
the goblins,
Yeah, the goblins especially. But they find some classic swords out of these trolls. Gandalf's famous sword Glamdring, Thorin Oakenshield's famous sword Orcrist, and Bilbo Baggins gets a little short sword that I forgot. I can't believe I forgot this. Is not he names that sword. I did not. I always
and he names it later.
Yeah, he names it later. In my head, it was always Gandalf gave it to him and is like, and this one is called Sting. But no, that's
because
not
it stings the goblins.
Yes.
And Orcrist is called Orcrist because it Orcrists the goblins.
And Glamdring is called Glamdring because it Glamdrings the goblins.
You've been Glamdringed, bro.
That's his classic line. Gandalf keeps saying in this book. So this is we're eventually in Rivendell now. They're really cooking, it took Frodo fucking forever to get to Rivendell. It took Bilbo 25 pages to get to Rivendell. So they get to Rivendell, the first homely house of the oh my god, that's embarrassing.
The first homely house? Or is it
that's it on the way back. They call it the last one because it's the...
What? Wait, but it's the same place.
Yeah, but they call Bilbo jokingly is like, it's the last one because it's the last one we've seen on our way from...
I didn't get that was a joke. I thought they were like, it's called both. I was confused.
No. Here, actually, let me just make sure. This book is for real fucking nerds, huh? Oh, no, sorry. I was messed up. It is the last homely house, but he's like, or it's the first one, because it's the first one. It's like, whatever. Funny stuff. Right, exactly.
It's funny because it's like sort of like kid humor almost.
Right, yeah.
And like there's all this like stuff that's inserted. Like, it's not written like it's written like a fairy tale that like your grandpa is telling you. Where it's like they went from the goblins to the wargs. And they're like, and the narrator's like, and that's how the phrase "out of the frying pan into the fire" came to be. It's just like like, okay,
yeah, because the whole book is framed. There is like a first person narrator, and is like, I won't tell you anymore about that. And like that's not how the Lord of the Rings is written, but it is how the Hobbit is written, and I fucking love it. Like I can't get enough of it.
Well, it super works in it's not too much,
No, and it definitely could be like cringe in like a modern day lens of viewing this, but I don't think it is at all.
And I want to talk about the end, just like the style in general.
Yeah. Oh, me too. So we get to Rivendell where we meet Elrond, who is a big famous elf. becomes more of a character that in the following trilogy of novels than this one, but he they hang out at Elrond's Airbnb, and they fuel up, and they get ready to go and cross the Misty Mountains,
and they have to take off all their sheets and take out the trash.
Of course,
right?
Yep. Yeah, they got to do it. Then they're constantly checking
fee and...
right. Well, they got to check there's like a teddy bear in a weird spot, and they're like ripping it apart looking for like a camera in there. They're like, this feels fucked up. So they find shelter in a cave of the Misty Mountains during a snowstorm when they all get captured by goblins. Danylo, would you like to talk about the Goblin King and their adventures through the cave?
Yeah, sure. So Bilbo, and I almost called him Hobbit. That's like his first name. Hobbit and friends. So Bilbo and his friends get captured by the goblins, but because Bilbo screamed, Gandalf woke up early, and he did not get captured. And so they all get captured by the goblins, who are all evil and are, I believe this is a quote, invented all the machines that today now give us so much trouble. So you heard it here first, folks. Goblins invented cars, and that's why the world sucks.
No walkable cities because of goblins.
But yeah, so they get captured by the goblins, and then they get taken to the Goblin King, who is a evil goblin, and then Gandalf turns out all the lights, and they escape.
Yeah.
Right?
And importantly, Gandalf kills the Goblin King.
Oh, yes. Gandalf kills the Goblin King.
But yeah, they escape. Or at least they're trying to escape when Bilbo Baggins clumsily falls down a huge hole. I can never remember exactly
I feel like he gets left behind in the dark, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he gets left behind and ends up wandering into this scary zone, into a fear zone. And he finds an inconspicuous golden ring, which
in the pitch darkness.
Yeah, which is one of the most famous literary retcons is the importance of this ring, because when thinking about it in the realm of this being a children's book that's just The Hobbit, it's like, oh, of course he found a magic ring that he can turn invisible. But with later knowledge, it's the ring wanted to be found, and so positioned itself in a way that it knew that this person it could try to manipulate would have it, and it's the One Ring. They don't ever say that in this book, but that is what it is.
Well, and now this was not. I looked up the publication and the edition history of these books, and J.R.R. Tolkien is no Brandon Sanderson. This was not planned.
No, it was not planned.
He went back and was like, I'm going to change this chapter so it works with this insane other book I'm writing.
Yeah. He did have to go back and change some stuff, but here we meet Gollum, and I got to tell you, the riddle game between Gollum and Bilbo has got to be one of my favorite things in any book ever, personally, for me.
I wish I could read it for the first time. I think it's very cool.
Yeah, it's so cool, and it's so scary still. The way Gollum is encountered is
Gollum is it's the scariest thing in the book, and he's so
God,
I don't know if it's
far.
a function of the rewrite, but it's all of a sudden oh, this is real now. This is a real scary guy.
Yeah, it does feel like the beginnings of what would become okay, so we'll talk about this more when we're gonna spoiler alert for the podcast, we're gonna read Fellowship of the Ring next after this, but the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring sort of feels like The Hobbit 1.5. It the way it's written, and it feels very childish, and then when the character of Aragorn is introduced, suddenly I don't know if J.R.R. Tolkien felt like he found a mature voice to be able to tell this story through, but it the tone changes pretty drastically into being an adult or a piece of adult fiction, and the Gollum part of this book feels sort of like that. It does not feel I did read this when I was a kid and was really scared of Gollum and this part. I had already seen the Lord of the Rings movies, obviously, before I had read The Hobbit. But so I could like picture it. It wasn't like as amalgamous in my head of being just like this creepy little crawly. I had like a face and a voice to attribute to it, but even with
Andy
that,
Serkis.
I was still scared. Of course, the greatest of all time. But yeah, I mean this riddle game is great. And ends in just the most bullshit cheater way you could ever end anything ever. Gollum should have ripped off Bilbo Baggins's head for the question that Bilbo asked.
And then Bilbo like makes like the narrator talks about how like this is the ancient riddle game and the rules are very strict, but technically what Bilbo did wasn't against the rules of the ancient riddle game.
Yeah, it's like okay.
Yeah, he cheats by, instead of giving a riddle because he couldn't think of one, he just says, "Hey, what's in my pocket?" You have 3 guesses.
Well, he doesn't even say that. He's like, "What's in my pocket?" And Gollum's like, "Bro, I have to have more than one guess." And he's like, "All right, fine, you can have 3."
Yeah, Gollum agrees. He's like, fine.
Because the what's on the line is if Bilbo loses, Gollum's going to eat him. If Bilbo wins, Gollum will lead him out of the cave. But
yeah.
a guy like
Ostensibly.
me, I would not trust Gollum from the rip to lead me out of this cave if I win the riddle. If I beat him at something, he's gonna be nice to me. I don't think so.
Well, I don't know about you, but anytime I'm in a cave with like a creepy weirdo, I immediately trust him completely.
Oh yeah, and you start asking him riddles.
Yeah.
Duh,
And then we have a fun little time, and then he leaves me out and says, "It was nice knowing you." Yeah. And then I rob him.
By accident. You didn't know you took.
I robbed him by accident, but I also don't give it back to him once I realize I've robbed him.
And it's not just robbed him, you took his birthday present.
You took the thing that brings him the most joy in the entire world. This poor guy who eats fish and lives in a cave with no clothes.
So he says, what do I have in my pocket? And then Gollum's like, loses, obviously, because that's an impossible question to answer. He says lint, and Bilbo's
card.
I know. Well, no, Gollum says lint, and Bilbo's like, no, that's bullshit. There's definitely lint in there. Just because that's not what you meant
Wasn't
doesn't
his
mean.
first guess like nothing?
Yeah,
which was pretty good.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, sorry, not lint. It's nothing, and then he's like, your hands. and then he takes them out. And he's like, no.
That's where if I were Gollum, I would rip Bilbo's head off.
Just eat his head. So Gollum goes. He's like, I'll lead you out. I just need to get one thing first, and then Gollum goes to get his ring, and then slowly starts to put it together. When he finds it's gone, it's like, oh, what do you have in your pocket? And Bilbo's not answering him, and so he runs away, and he trips and falls, and the ring slips onto his finger, and he disappears.
He's invisible.
He is invisible. This is the most overpowered literary device of all time. Like, for the burglar of the company who can't burgle for anything to find the thing that can make him invisible and the best at burgling ever. Not
and
bad.
It's the only thing that can make someone invisible, so no one in the world is even prepared to think about looking for someone who might be invisible.
Right. Yeah, I know.
It'd be different than like D&D
invisible.
where like, oh, there's going to be some wizard who can cast invisibility, so we better keep an eye out for it. That does not exist in this world.
No.
The dragon's like, where is this guy?
Yeah, I always think that's funny that the dragon can't... It can smell him, but even Smaug can't see. Just like, I feel like a dragon would be able to see it, you know?
And that's how we get true sight in D&D 5e.
That's true. That's 1,000% right. So Bilbo has the ring, and he manages to escape all the goblins, and he manages to escape the cave, and he hears the dwarves hanging out and being like, I think we should just leave. and he sneaks through a little brush, and he scares the fuck out of all of them, and they're all like, Bilbo, we were just on our way back to save you. God.
That happens so many times where like, we gotta leave him behind. He's kind of useless.
Poor Bilbo. And Gandalf, they're all asking questions, but Bilbo refrains from letting them know about the ring for now, which I don't know. I think that I could be totally wrong about this, but that is part of it that is rewritten. because
Oh, really? He doesn't tell them?
because if he's like, yeah, I found a magic ring that can make me invisible. Like Gandalf doesn't, in the Fellowship of the Ring, doesn't know. He knows the power of the ring. He doesn't know that like the One Ring can do that, but he's a smart guy. I feel like he'd be like, what? Huh? And then later in the book, when he does tell them about the ring, Gandalf's not around. So I feel like it works out that way.
Because Gandalf would have, like, even if he wasn't sure what it was, like, that's a crazy thing to
just find.
Like, if Bilbo found a gun, Gandalf would be like, let's see what this is about.
That is what it feels like. Like, in the context of the powers of this world, it does feel like Bilbo found a sniper. He was, like, hired as the assassin and had no powers, and then found a high-powered rifle with a scope on it. So they escape, but they escape from this, and then right into a den of wargs, which are evil wolves.
And I did not know this, but in this book they have their own language, and they talk to each other in their own language. Whereas in the movies and in all portrayals, they're like just wolves and dogs, and they're gross. Yeah. But they're actually their own like species, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, they're their own little society, and they're all evil. Well, all the ones we see are evil. You know, I don't know.
It's heavily implied that everyone anywhere in the world is evil.
But thank God, because a bunch of magic eagles just swoop down and save all of our friends.
Yep.
Now the eagles, Danylo.
It's a hot topic.
How come the eagles didn't just take the dwarves to Erebor?
No, that's because eagles don't like rings.
Oh, is that why? Yeah. There is actually, for all of the people.
I think there is a reason. I was thinking you were saying, well, why didn't the eagles take the ring to Mordor? That's always the question.
But it's for the same reason, which people who ask that question have never read this book, because there's a pretty definitive answer as to why.
Yeah, they say it. They're like, because there's a dragon and we don't want to die.
Yeah, there's the dragon and it's just going to kill them all. And then they're like, if we fly over the domain of man, they're going to hunt us and kill us and eat us. Because they're not like invincible. They're just big, smart eagles. Like if you shoot one in the head with a gun, it will die. So yeah, and then they meet a guy who can turn into a bear.
A druid. The first druid.
They meet a druid.
A druid who likes his bees.
Yeah, they get dropped off, and there's like a funny little gag where I do actually really like this part where Danylo, please explain the Beorn gag.
So Beorn is the big hairy man who can turn into a bear, and Gandalf sort of they've never met, but like Gandalf knows of him, and they like don't want to make him angry. The fact that there's 14 people who they need to like come in and like, hey, can you give us a bunch of stuff because we lost it all. So in order to make Beorn not mad and turn into a bear and kill them all, Gandalf comes in with just him and Bilbo and one dwarf, and they start talking, and then throughout the course of the conversation they like gradually increase the number of dwarves they're talking about. So they're like, so Bjorn's like, oh, hey, you three, like, how did you come to be here? It's like, oh, well, several of us came down to, like, it's weird that you're calling three several. It's like, oh, we actually have 2 more outside. Why don't you bring them in?
And they've got their timings wrong, so some of them are, like, appearing closer than originally talked about. And he's like, you guys were probably standing pretty close to the door. How'd you get here so fast? It's very good.
Every time they're like telling their story, and they're like, yeah, so there was about 10 of us over here. Like 10? That's a weird way to talk about 7 of you. And then, oh, that's right, there's 2 more actually. And
yeah, and then it's revealed that Gandalf or Bilbo puts it together like Gandalf's actually really smart because he kept interrupting a story that Beorn wanted to hear, and so of course he's going to invite 14 of us in.
But they tell Bjorn a very good story about their own adventures. And Bjorn doesn't really believe them, but it's like, it's a good story. You can sleep here. And then in the middle of the night, he like travels the whole length of their journey to like corroborate their story. And he comes back. He's like, I like it better now that I know it's true.
Yeah. And then, eventually Bjorn gives them some ponies and some food and some provisions and sends them to Mirkwood. Mm-hmm. And Gandalf's like, I gotta take this phone call. I really, this is a really important thing I gotta do. And so he just leaves.
And everyone's like, what sort of important stuff? And he's like, don't worry about it.
Which at the end is revealed of what he was doing, which is fighting the necromancer, which is Sauron. But he's regaining power under the guise of this this name, which is a terrible disguised name. I would not, if I am an evil being trying to secretly regain my power, I would not name myself the Necromancer.
Name myself something evil.
Yeah, it'd be like Keith. The Council of Light does not have to convene to assassinate Keith. No, that's not happening.
Because no one would be paying attention to Keith anyway. But if you name yourself something like the Necromancer, someone might come in, maybe stop.
Yeah.
It's like if Hitler came back from the dead and tried to do it all over again. Yeah, he's like, my name is still Hitler. Like, that guy would be dead in 2 minutes.
It's that his name is still Hitler, and the area of Germany he's living in is becoming like more evil and dark. Like, I think I know what's happening. I think that's really him.
Yeah, and all the countries get together. We know what to do here. We're not gonna wait and see how this plays out.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my god. Okay, so we're in Mirkwood. Everybody gets captured by giant scary spiders. Well, actually, that happens after. So imagine you are on a college campus, and you see a sweet house party, and as soon as you open the doors of the house party, all the lights go off and they come back on like a couple seconds later. There's nobody there at all. These idiots, the dwarves and Bilbo, do that 3 times to fires that they see around Mirkwood that are elves like partying and having a good time, and they just need food.
Yeah, because they're like starving in this forest because they ran out of...
They're constantly running out of food.
Ran out of food. It's because they eat so much. And but then they had the bright idea of like, let's climb to the top of the tree and see how far we have to go. And then Bilbo goes up there and is like, it doesn't look like it's ever gonna end. We're gonna be trapped. And the narrator's like, what Bilbo didn't know is there was just a curve in the rock, and they were almost out, but he had no way of knowing that.
Yeah, I forgot about that part, because like when I was a kid, I remember that part being so visually like striking of him like climbing and seeing like the whole forest, and I completely forgot about the next part where it's like they're actually almost out. Bilbo's a fucking idiot, and there's no way he could have.
Bilbo wasn't tall enough, but if he was tall enough, he could have seen it.
So they climb down, and Bilbo he like sits down, and then something sticky gets on his hand. Whoa! And then it's a spider's web who is just like quietly tying him up, and I guess Bilbo didn't notice, but whatever.
And the spider was like, oh.
Whoa!
That's not what it looks like.
Hey, man, another group of creatures that have their own language. They have a conversation, the creepy giant spiders, and Bilbo gouges one's eyes out, and then the spider's like, that really stings! And Bilbo's like, I like that. I'm keeping that.
And then Bilbo goes all out on these spiders. He like... At no point in this book, even the final battle isn't as like gory as Bilbo hacking away at these spiders. He gouges its eyes out and chops limbs off, and it's crazy.
He's pissed off. They had his friends that don't like him that he also doesn't like, so he had to save them.
But he doesn't know where all the money is, so he needs them to take him there.
That's true. He does, but he manages to save all of the dwarves. Which the way that I think he saves Philly first, like he like cuts the rope out of him, and he's been like poisoned and all fucked up, and he can like barely move. Like this is also a very scary part. And also there's 2 different times in this book where dwarves get packed into something small because J.R.R. Tolkien was like, this is funny. And it does happen 2 times.
The second time being the barrels, which we'll get to shortly.
Which, yeah, pretty soon after this, because after they escape the spiders and all the dwarves are together again, they instantly are surrounded by a bunch of wood elves with bows and arrested. Except before Bilbo can be arrested, he puts the ring on, so he doesn't get all chained up with them. So he's like creeping along, and they're getting led to the Elf King's compound. Danylo, would you like to describe this next bit about
Sure.
how does Bilbo, how are our goofy guys going to get out of this one?
Well, the elves capture all the dwarves and are gonna hold on to them because the dwarves don't want to tell the elves that, we're after a bunch of money. Because the elves would then be like, well, we're not going to let you, we're going to do it then.
Right. Which they do at the end. That is what happens.
Yes, they do.
Good thing they didn't tell them.
But the dwarves are all trapped in their cells, and Bilbo, because he doesn't know what to do, but because he's invisible and sort of scampering around this, they're like in like a cave system. It's not like the goblin. It's very like... J.R.R. Tolkien's like, it's not like the Goblin's Cave. This one's a nice cave with good people in it, and it's clean, and it's not dirty and filled with gooey goblins.
But it's still like a cave, which I always thought was, it's like not like a colony built like in the trees. Like, that's what I feel like I would have done, but it's still like a weird cave.
It's not like ants in like burrowing. No. It's like, there's like halls, and there's tables, and there's a front door.
I feel like the dwarves and the elves could have it in common. These elves literally live underground in a cave, and so do the dwarves, but boy, do they hate each other.
Yeah, but the goblins do it wrong, and they're dirty. You gotta kill them all. But yeah, Bilbo, because he's like wandering around, he finds there's like, they have this barrel shipment system.
It's the most convoluted thing in the whole world.
Where there's like a river that kind of goes under the cave. It's like starts outside and goes into the cave, and then stays underground for a bit, and then goes outside again and goes down to like the where all the humans live, like in Lake Town and kind of over there. And they like the elves like pack their goods in these barrels. They like get them from somewhere, and they pack the goods in the barrels, and they send them down the river to trade with humans. They just emptied a shipment. And so Bilbo's like, I'm going to free all the dwarves one at a time and stick them in these barrels, and we're going to escape. And then they do that. Except, right at the end, Bilbo's like, wait, I forgot to put myself in a barrel. And then so he has to jump in the cold water. And the greatest sequence in cinematic history occurs, right?
Oh my god. Dude, this has got to be the worst, maybe the worst, like, from page to screen, this is, I don't know, listener, I don't know if you've ever seen is it the first Hobbit movie? No, it's the second one.
No, what happens in the first one, because the first one goes all the way through Smaug. Like, no,
the first one goes all the way through the Goblin Cave. The second one goes up to when Smaug leaves to go burn down Lake Town, and then the third one is a 2.5 hour movie about the Battle of the Five Armies.
Well, listener, it doesn't really matter because those movies are bad, and no one likes them.
Yeah, this whole part with the Elf King and the elves, and I really like this part of this book. I always get, this happens a few times throughout the book, is like characters keep losing track of how much time. It really sounds like they've spent weeks in prison in the care of Thranduil, the Elven King. He's not named in the book, but and here we are. He is named in the movie, but he's not named in the book. It is Thranduil. Yeah, the Elven King, he's like he's very pompous. It's funny, nobody in this book, nobody in charge of a group of people in this book is good. Is because we meet the master of Lake Town, who is like a dirty scumbag who just cares about himself. And the Elven King here is like, I guess he's like literally lawful good, but he's still like a pompous asshole.
Yeah.
And then as soon as Thorin Oakenshield gets any ounce of power, he becomes like a crazy tyrant. Yeah. So I feel like it does a very good job of being like, hey, the book is like, hey, maybe people who are in charge of stuff aren't always the good guy. Like, you don't always have to just think that they're right because they're in charge, which I do like that as a
that is
message.
Interesting. I remember because like I think the first person you meet is like Elrond, and like he seemed a lot nicer in this book than he was in the movies. Yeah. But I remember reading this the first time and getting to the wood elves. I'm like, oh, these are going to be like the other ones. I'm like, oh, I kind of don't like these guys. They're kind of assholes.
Yeah, they are assholes. This is also where in the movie Legolas is introduced. Lest we forget, Legolas is not in the book, but he is an important part of the movie. Also, before, just another book movie thing, just very quickly, very early in this book, there's a line that's like, the stone giants were throwing boulders at them, and in the movie, that's like a whole like 15-minute part of the movie. There's like a sentence in the book that could be like a metaphor. Like, I don't know if there's really stone giants throwing boulders, but
or like it
whatever.
Felt like it, or like, you know,
right.
like in that fairy tale way where it's not literal. And then in the movie, Peter Jackson was like, we gotta have them giant CGI, just more CGI.
Yeah, which, to each their own. I'm sure somebody out there likes the Hobbit movies.
I think one of the hardest parts about rereading this book was to actively try to not think about the movies.
Is to remember that like Feely in the movie is like a hot stud. Remember that? He's got like no beard. That's like his whole.
And there's a whole love story with him and a wood elf who like brings him food in the. Oh God.
Yeah. There is actually, I thought it was funny that they chose Feely to be the love interest, because there's a moment in this book where Feely loses his beard. Like, it's because of the webs. He has to, like, cut it all off, so he is, like, handsome and has stubble, and it's like, that's why they did it.
Or it's, like, horribly torn and red and, like, bleeding because he ripped the beard off.
No way. That can't be true.
I don't know if you know this, but if you rip your beard off, it doesn't become stubble.
Well, who told me that? Peter Jackson said that's what would happen. I've based every sexual encounter I've ever had, I've gotten it from a piece of Peter Jackson media. Mortal Engines? Anyway. So yeah, they float down the barrel. Or they float down the river in barrels and
for like days. I don't like how long.
It's a long time.
It's not a 2-second romp like in the movie. They get out and they're like weak and starved, and Bilbo's like, I'm fine. I'm a little cold, but
yeah, Bilbo's like fed up with it. It's like, did you want to get out of there or didn't you? Now get the fuck up and help me get everybody else out of these things.
You've not only have you all done nothing, but I have saved all 13 of you on multiple occasions.
Yep. So they eventually get to Lake Town, which is you're never gonna believe this. It's a town on a lake. There's one big old bridge.
It's not next to a lake. It's literally it's on a lake.
And they stroll in, and Thorin's like, "What's up, punks? I'm the new king of everything." And everybody's like, "Hell yeah!" The people of Lake Town are so easily swayed by just anybody with an ounce of charisma. And they go from wild extremes like, we love Thorin! And then all it takes is for like somebody handsome to be like, I don't like Thorin. And it's like, fuck you, Thorin Oakenshield. It happens constantly in the last like 50 pages of this book, which I kept thinking was pretty funny. Sorry. Whoa. Oh, there we go. Sorry, listener, if my voice is annoying you. I am sick. Okay, but much like Bilbo Baggins in this specific part of the book, we soldier on in the face of sickness.
Mac was very brave and kept on going.
My stummy heart. I threw up. This is also Bilbo Baggins issues his hilarious line, "Thank you very much," when he's sick. It's hilarious.
He's got a little cold from the river. He says, "Thank you very much."
He can hardly enjoy being put in a palatial estate and fed all the food he wants for weeks because he was a little sick. But yeah, they're hanging out in town. They're getting the A+ treatment, but the master of Lake Town is like, I don't really know about this. They might be lying. They're not lying, of course, as we know, but
Like, why are we feeding them all our food and spending a bunch of money on them? And
wouldn't they be leaving to go to the mountain if they were really the dwarves from the mountain? But eventually they do leave, and of course they're trying to find, earlier in the book, the map that Thorin Oakenshield has displays Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, and there's a secret entrance because they can't very well walk through the front door. There's a big scary dragon.
And this was so cool. I totally forgot about the, like, back when they were in with Elrond, like the moon writing. I thought that was really just a cool random detail. And they're like, oh, good thing we looked at it today because this is the only night that it would ever appear for the whole year. They're like, the goblins are like, whew, or the dwarves. Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, they really luck out with this entire bit. Like, they're just about to give up looking for the door when suddenly, like, the moon makes it open. And
I want to talk about this later. I read a little bit about Tolkien's, like, philosophy of fairy stories and, like, what he thinks they should do, because I think he gets a lot of flack. I think in this book and also in Lord of the Rings, like, the eagles show up right in the nick of time and save them.
Yeah.
And like all of the you would say, like, in modern writing, like, coincidences or like them being very cheap, he, like, put there on purpose. Like, they're purposely like that because he has, like, a bigger philosophical point about, like, what fairy stories should do, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Were you aware of that at all?
No, I've not anything specific. I knew he had, like, a weird thing about fairy stories, but I didn't. We can get into that now if you'd like.
Yeah. He called it, like, because, you know, I don't know if you know this, listeners, but Tolkien was a big nerd. He taught college.
He did. At Oxford, no less.
At Oxford. And so he had, like, this conception of, like, things happen, like good things and bad things happening, that I think it's called, like, eucatastrophe, EU, and discatastrophe, which is like a bad thing happening and having no redemptive qualities, and then a eucatastrophe being like, oh, something randomly happens and it's good. And I came across this quote from an essay he wrote, which I just want to read it out loud because I think it's interesting. The consolation of fairy stories, the joy of the happy ending, or more correctly, of the good catastrophe, the sudden joyous turn, for there's no true end to any fairy tale. This joy, which is one of the things which fairy stories can produce supremely well, is not essentially escapist nor fugitive. In its fairy tale or other-world setting, it is a sudden and miraculous grace, never to be counted on to recur. It does not deny the existence of discatastrophe, of sorrow and failure. The possibility of these is necessary to the joy of deliverance. It denies, in the face of much evidence, if you will, universal final defeat, and insofar is evangelium, giving a fleeting glimpse of joy beyond the walls of the world, poignant as grief.
Wow.
So that is why the eagles always show up at the nick of time.
Because they have to, because there is no such thing as the final defeat.
He's like, that's not how he saw fantasy being. Like, yeah. Which I think is interesting.
They can't lose.
Yeah.
Or else it would not be that kind of story.
Yeah. Otherwise, yeah.
I like that. That's really interesting.
And it's interesting to think about that as, like, a different philosophy. And I thought about it. And then I sort of skimmed this essay. He has a long, like, 40-page super academic essay about, like, the history of fairy tales and fairy stories and, like, their relationship to children and adults and something. It was pretty interesting. But at the end, he, like, ties it up all in, like, his Christian faith. Like, because the story of Jesus Christ is a eucatastrophe, like, we were all saved as humanity by the grace of God. Therefore, these stories, like, human stories, will always have that sort of element to it where, like, we will all be saved by the grace of God, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. And if you want to tie it back to Brandon Sanderson's worldview,
I was just about to say,
like, oh yeah, of course the good guys are going to win and everything's going to be fine because, like, that's the worldview. So right. I thought that was an interesting little connection.
That is an interesting connection, and the chief difference between the two of them being J.R.R. Tolkien is a much better writer than Brandon Sanderson is.
Like the charm of the Hobbit, of his little interjections, is like charming. Brandon Sanderson's little interjections are, shall we say, not charming.
No, yes. Let's not mince words. We're going to call them not charming. So, anyway. The dwarves, they eventually get into the mountain. Bilbo...
Moon shines light on the door, reveals the key.
Big crack. Bilbo has another sort of riddle conversation, but this time with a dragon. Because Bilbo surmises in the moment that you can't be honest to a dragon. Or no, it's because he's heard stories that, like, if you talk to a dragon, you can't just be like, hey, my name's Rick, and this is what I do for work. You gotta be, like, cool about it. You gotta, like, be cool when you talk to a dragon.
You can't give a dragon your resume with all your PII on it, right?
No. No. You gotta be, like, vague on a resume. You gotta get them to, like, ask questions about you.
I am the Ukrainian sender of emails.
Yeah, exactly. Sender of emails.
Sender of electronic mail.
So Bilbo, he steals a big cup from Smaug, and then Smaug's like, I'm gonna go kill a bunch of human beings. I'm gonna go commit a horrible atrocity on this town. But thank God,
and it's because he surmised that the humans helped the dwarves, right?
Yeah, which is true, but not maybe to the extent that Smaug thinks, which is that the humans have actually like gone up to the mountain and assisted the dwarves like that. They really just gave them like ponies and sent them on their way.
The poor ponies. What's the pony death count in these books?
I don't know.
They go through a lot of ponies.
And then they get, ponies become like Bill the Pony in Fellowship of the Ring. Like they're like very stout creatures in these books, but sometimes they just get kind of fucked up. I think it's because it's not as like
4 sets of ponies. So there's 14.
Because if it was like an adult book being like, and the horses all died, you'd be like, oh no, but like a pony, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's sad, but that's not as sad. Oh, an important thing is Bilbo's like, I've heard that dragons are invincible, especially on their tummies, and Smaug rolls over and he's like, yep, all natural, baby. And Bilbo notices a big, just like Zelda boss hit right here.
And he clicks R3 and then can auto target onto it.
Yeah, exactly. And Bilbo goes outside and he's like, "Oh, I didn't learn anything except that for his big weakness." And there's like this bird who's like
listening.
Oh. Yeah, there's a bird who's listening, and Bilbo's so pissed off he's throwing rocks at the bird. And Balin's like, "Can you please stop doing that? It's like a thing. It can like think. It's not just like a bird." He's like, whatever.
I'm just pissed.
But Smaug leaves, and he's gonna go fuck up Lake Town, and the dwarves and Bilbo they're all exploring the dragon's hoard, and they're like, boy, we haven't heard from Smaug in a couple days.
Yeah, they're like D&D dungeon crawling for a couple of days. They like do a long rest in a cave.
They do. They actually do.
They
do
wake
a long
up and
rest.
they're like, I guess Smaug's not back.
Yeah,
and they're just
like
lucky,
exploring.
I guess.
And then the narrator is like, you're probably wondering where Smaug is, huh?
Well, Smaug is dead.
Yeah, so Smaug, he goes to Lake Town, and he starts fucking it up.
But the people of Lake Town are very prepared.
Yes.
They have a bunch of buckets of water, and it's described as soon as Smaug, like, does a bunch of fire, everyone's standing right there with buckets and like puts it out right away. And that like happens a couple times.
Yeah, it's a pretty funny visual. It's like, I guess Smaug is not the best at breathing fire.
He breathes fire, but then there's like 300 people just waiting with bucket of water. Like, it's super quick. But eventually, the Smaug's fire breath overwhelms the town, and it goes up in flames. And all hope seems lost. But
Bard, who's fresh out of arrows, except for the
Dragon
powerful
Slayer
badass arrow.
I've been saving this one for a special occasion. Maybe I should use it now.
A little birdie literally tells him that Smaug is weak to Dragon Slayer arrows.
In this one spot that you can lock onto. And so...
So Bard, he bosses up, man, and all it takes is that's a one-hit kill, brother. 100 experience points, and he goes down to the inky depths, and Smaug is dead. That's all it took. Smaug died. But that's not really what the story's about.
No,
Okay,
no.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's not really about Smaug. So Smaug dies, and then and then literally, this is an example of the townspeople being easily swayed. Bard is like, I think I'm going to restart the city of Dale, which was like a city of men right below the mountain. And people are like, yeah, we love Bard. Yeah, we should go do that. And the master's like, I actually think this is all Thorin Oakenshield's fault. And all the townspeople are like, let's go fucking kill Thorin Oakenshield. Like, that's seriously all it takes. And word gets out that Smaug is dead. And the elves are like, oh shit, Smaug's dead. Maybe that means we can get some gold. And then they're like, oh no, the dwarves are hoarding all the gold. Not on our watch. So the men and the elves team up, and that's 2 of the 5 armies.
And then back in the mountain, Thorin and company. Is this when they send a message to like the Thorin's cousin of the dwarves to be like, hey, Smaug is dead.
Yeah.
Can you bring your army down here?
Yeah.
And now we have 3 armies on the on the march.
Army of dwarves, army of elves, and army of men. The army of men, I mean, I guess it's it's probably like 15 guys. Like Lake Town's, I don't know, like 15 guys, but whatever. Army of men.
Well, and I really liked this part of, I think the whole sequence of they get to the mountain, they realize they'd not thought that far ahead, and Bill was like, what's the plan? And they're like, I don't know. We didn't think we'd get this far. Like, you didn't have a plan for the dragon?
Yeah. It's very good. It's very funny.
And then he leaves, and they're like, all right, let's go check it out. And then dies off screen. And then I think I really love the plot point of, oh, the dragon guarding all the treasure is dead, and everyone hears about it. So everyone's like, there's a big unguarded treasure now. And so they all like beeline to it. I think that's really cool. And then the dwarves are all there, and you're like, fuck, there's all these armies going to get, like, how are they going to protect all this gold?
I love that it ends up being Smaug was maybe one of the least of their worries. It was like
or like a fake problem. Like it is like he's actually guarding, like his absence is almost more of a problem for them than like his presence.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about this now because this is an important part, and if you are aware of this in the history of Tolkien and the history of dwarves specifically, and we didn't talk about it, I feel like that would not be appropriate because it is important. I have notes here about it. Just let me pull it up. Okay, so the dwarves in this book have gotten have come under scrutiny, and specifically J.R.R. Tolkien, for being Jewish stereotypes. They have. So you are not. If you have thought that, you are not the only person to have thought that. There are many articles written. People have tried to explain it away in such a thing like, oh, J.R.R. Tolkien was friends with a bunch of Jews, and he was like just sort of like making fun of them,
right?
Right, yeah, exactly. He was like friends with them and was just like ribbing them and joking with them. Importantly, it is in this conversation to recognize that J.R.R. Tolkien was incredibly anti-Nazi Germany. In fact, a German publisher of The Hobbit once asked him if he was Aryan after reading The Hobbit, and J.R.R. Tolkien went in and rewrote a bunch of it because he wanted to make it clear. That rewrite is the book we have today, and there's still stuff in there though that is not great, and I don't think that's ever going to be changed. However, later in Tolkien's writing, and we'll talk about this with Gimli. Gimli is not like this at all, and Gimli is not. I'm getting a lot of this language from an article. I just want to make that clear that I was reading by somebody named Matthew Willis called J.R.R. Tolkien's Jewish Dwarves. The people of Middle Earth weren't just a product of Tolkien's creative mind; they were shaped by the anti-Jewish culture that surrounded him. And at the end of this article, which is really good, you should read it. J.R.R. Tolkien has had like a cultural imaginary of the Jewish person, and this is me talking. I think he thought that was sort of funny. It of course wasn't funny, and it's not okay to think it was funny, but I think him being an affluent British author who I'm sure like he was like, oh, the Jews, isn't that funny? Like he like thought the stereotypes were funny. After World War II, he saw how that stereotype could be distorted and made into something altogether like mythologized about a group of people and used for something as bad as the Holocaust. And Tolkien is really resolute that the trilogy is not about World War II. His rewriting of the dwarves in The Lord of the Rings is important because they become, through Gimli, way more heroic and self-sacrificing and way less obsessed with like money and gold and
there aren't a bunch of goofballs obsessed with gold.
Right, yeah. And they're not like, they don't have a bunch of the harmful stereotypes that the dwarves have in The Hobbit, which is like, they're not really going to help unless there's something in it for them, too. It's like, there's a lot of stuff like that in this book, but Gimli isn't like that at all, and Gimli is not portrayed as an outlier. He is like the most representative of that. And I like that there's somebody, gosh, let me find it, because this person, quotes somebody else named Brackman. I can't find it exactly in the article, but Brackman suggests that the rewrite might have had a tinge of guilt under it as he realized that the tying together of unpleasant stereotypes about Jews and his depiction of the dwarves drew on beliefs that could have horrifying consequences for the real people so perceived. And the author of the article finishes it off with saying, and maybe, like a provincial hobbit, Tolkien could learn and change in the wider world, which, of course, there's literal physical evidence that is what happened. I just think that's important to talk about because I certainly didn't notice it when I was a kid and was reading this book. I did notice it this time, and so I just wanted to make that clear.
My mind, that's super interesting. But what I think is interesting to point out, and I was going to bring this up to the end, but this seems like a really good segue. Like even though it's a kid's book, it still like doesn't. And like that, the whole dwarf thing aside, like it doesn't really escape the sort of colonialist, posh British values.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas like, with Bilbo is like the lives of hobbits is very much framed as like the ideal for humans, which is to have an English country home and no one has to work, and like that's a very specific worldview to have. And similarly with the treatment of goblins, they're all bad, and it is good that they are all wiped out at the end of this book. Like it still has that the D&D problem, because D&D comes from this of like, oh, the whole species or race is the same,
Yeah, for sure.
Which is like, like it's a children's book, but also I think, that's important to point out.
And going off of that, I mean, the ideal of men is portrayed as being very similar to the ideal of elves, which is similar to being portrayed as the ideal of like the hobbits, which is this like, you are at one with nature, and the other are people who are not at one with nature. And in this book, the dwarves are presented as the other because they're not at one with nature. They like mine and destroy rock and stuff.
And the goblins build cars or whatever.
Yes. They built a lot of things that have given us a whole heck of a lot of trouble.
Like trolleys and the Iron Railroad.
And I think that idea of like, I think Tolkien's idea of nature also changes. Like the dwarves are the dwarves and the elves not liking each other in The Lord of the Rings comes off a lot more of just like, it's just like funny, like there's lore reasons, but like in the context of the book, it's like the short stocky warrior doesn't get along with the tall, like beautiful, like who's like he has a bow and arrow, and like, oh, I'm not gonna go in there and get dirty, and the dwarf's like, no, we're gonna like hack him to bits, and
it's like based in character. It's not like racially charged.
Yeah, which is different than this. Like we have I don't know, I just think that's an interesting thing that I feel like people don't really always talk about when they talk about The Lord of the Rings. So
well, and I think we can talk about this now too, where when I was in college, I like read a bunch. I was an English major, Now I have a book podcast. I ended up reading taking a lot of classes where I read a lot of like medieval epics and some like Norse mythology stuff, and like the same sort of like I was in classes with like a bunch of grad students who were really into Tolkien, and they were in this subject because they liked the Lord of the Rings. I never read the Lord of the Rings, like, you know, Celtic mythology and all that stuff. And I think it's interesting. And then like the Grimm's fairy tales we like would read and analyze. And the interesting thing about The Hobbit is that it feels like Beowulf, like that world, like someone, like he took a fairy tale and like pasted it onto this Beowulf Old Norse world, which like is inherently very simple. And I think it's really cool to read this having read those things, because even like the tone or the sentence structure reads a lot like those sorts of translations where it's like, oh, a character appears in one sentence, or like this character is son of blank who
that's everywhere in this,
whose shield is called this, and like those like that sort of phrasing or styling is like directly lifted from these original source materials, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
And then there is like it's 13 dwarves on a little adventure. Like that's just a fairy tale.
Yeah. I mean, this is I feel, you know, it's funny. I feel like we've stumbled upon a really good stopping point, and yet we have not actually finished talking about the book. I'm just very quickly. I mean, it doesn't really. We've talked about all the important like allegory and stuff already, but Bilbo and the crew are present for a huge battle where like literally the book frames it like all of goblin kind has been wiped out.
Well, so we only talked about 3 armies. So we have the humans, we have the elves, we have the dwarves, and then they're all about to fight each other. Because Thorin... Okay, you were going to talk about, like, the gold sickness. So, like, as soon as they get...
Right.
As soon as Smaug is dead and Bilbo and all his dwarf friends are in the mountain with all the gold, Thorin, like, loses his mind and goes crazy and doesn't want to give up any of the gold. And so, like, the humans come and he's like, hey, so I killed that dragon for you. Can we have a tiny bit of gold?
Yeah,
and Thorin's like... And Thorin's like, no. My cousin's going to be here soon.
And he's going to kick your sorry ass.
And then, Bilbo steals the Arkenstone, which is the only thing that Thorin wants, and gives it to the men and the elves as like a bargaining chip. And Thorin almost throttles Bilbo.
Yeah, he almost throws him right off of the fucking wall.
And Gandalf's back.
Yeah, Gandalf's back, and he's like, I took care of that necromancer business. I'm here for this now.
Good thing we'll never have to worry about that necromancer again.
So yeah, they're all about to go to bat. They're literally like fight. Like arrows have already been shot or are in the air when like a big scary swarm of evil bats shows up, and then Gandalf's like, I think we should maybe focus on this instead.
The goblins are here.
Didn't that just happen?
And it is literally all the goblins in the world.
Yeah, all the goblins of the north and the wargs, the final 2 armies, have arrived to form the Battle of 5 Armies, for which Bilbo is invisible the whole time, which is pretty funny.
And then he gets hit in the head and gets knocked unconscious for the rest of the time.
And then they don't find his body because he's invisible. And so they like had been searching the area forever, and then Bilbo like wakes up and takes it off, and then somebody sees him and is like, where the fuck did you come from? Yeah, we've been looking for you.
The order of events is the battle begins. Bilbo is like, this is the most horrible thing I've seen in my entire life. He gets hit in the head and goes unconscious. Then he wakes up and everyone's like, oh, the battle's over.
Yep. And Thorin's been stabbed 28 times.
Thorin's on his deathbed. And the narrator's like, you're probably wondering how that battle went. That's also very, very like Old Norse fairy tale, like weird flashbacks of like, you would never write anything modern this way.
No.
Like, it's like it's like the author having too much fun.
I know,
with,
yeah.
Like the telling of the tale, which I feel like doesn't really happen anymore, because like people would be annoyed at the author for doing something like this. But I think in sort of that old epic Northern European style, like this was a common thing. Like, oh, it's just the storyteller having a little bit of fun with this thing you wanted to know.
Yeah, which I like especially in this. I think it's funny and it's effective. Well. But sadly, Thorin Oakenshield dies from his injuries,
which I forgot happened. I was like, what?
Oh yeah,
Thorin dies.
Yeah, Thorin dies, and Fili and Kili die too because they were protecting him. Which, I don't know why, it never fails to make me a little bit emotional. Like the fact that it's described as like Thorin gets stabbed and all the dwarves just like surround him and are just like, we're just gonna die and we're not gonna let them touch. And then Bjorn is like, I'll take it from here, and he's like a 30-foot tall bear and fucks everybody up. It should really be the battle of the 6 armies, because the book makes it sound like nobody would have won if it not for Beorn. He fucks everybody up.
The Eagles show up too, so it's the battle of 7 armies.
Yeah, that's true. Also, the Eagles are there.
So the Eagles are the 6th army, and Bjorn is his own army.
Yep. But yeah, so I mean, they're all dead. Bilbo's like, I don't really want any of this money anymore. Like,
I don't even know how I'm gonna carry it home.
So he just gets a little bit of money in 2 chests, and him and Gandalf hit the road, and we get a really sort of lovely like, hey, remember that? Remember this part of the book?
And it was so much safer because all the goblins were dead.
Yes, yeah. It's the back again part of the novel.
Mm-hmm. And they stay at Bjorn's Airbnb for a couple days.
Yep, they do. And then I like how the narrator's like, some of Bjorn's kids were real fucking pieces of shit, but most of them were good. I was like, yeah, they stay with Bjorn for a couple of days. The Thranduil, the Elf King, is like, you should come to Mirkwood, and they're like, I'd rather kill myself than step foot in Mirkwood one more time. No. Oh, just going back, Gandalf has a cast on his arm. When he
has a sling, and then Bilbo sees Gandalf with a sling on his arm. That's like, wow, and he's like, wow, I guess no one really escaped this battle unscathed. And I'm like, what was he doing that he strained his shoulder?
No. Yeah, they get through Mirkwood. They pass back through the Misty Mountains. They hang out with Elrond for a little bit. And then they get back to Hobbiton and the Bag End, and they fucking having a fucking home auction because they thought Bilbo Baggins was dead. He was gone for a year.
About this was so funny. I was like, oh my god.
It's the perfect way to end the book. Is he shows up and like his family members he doesn't like are like trying to take his spoons, and he's like, what the fuck?
It's the day they're auctioning off all his stuff because he's presumed dead because he's been gone for more than a year. And then he's like, oh, brother. And then it's like he has to spend his newfound dragon gold getting all his spoons back from his family.
And then Balin and some time passes, and Balin and Gandalf show up, and they're like, oh, we went on quite an adventure, didn't we? Then the book ends. And that's it.
The end. Hobbit lived. Hobbit. I called him Hobbit again.
Hobbit lives again.
Hobbit lives a happily ever after.
Hobbit ring made it home. Calling him Hobbit is pretty funny.
I don't know. I've never had that issue. I know his name is Bilbo. It's Martin Freeman.
Yeah, it's the titular Martin Freeman. The movie's called Martin Freeman.
The titular Martin Freeman. Martin Freeman as Hobbit.
Oh man. Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. Good book, huh?
Yeah. I mean, if you don't like this book, I don't know what to tell you. Not that I think you'd be wrong, but, I think you figure out pretty quickly if this sort of shit's not for you.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. But I think even, there's some, whimsy in here where I feel like if you read this and you're like, ugh, I hate it, I'd be like, you need to grow up, get over yourself a little bit.
I think there'd be something you would like. I haven't read Lord of the Rings. I could imagine someone starting Lord of the Rings and being like, I do not like this, and that seeming to be fair. Whereas Hobbit, if you read this, there's probably something you like. And I felt like, I think the true power of this book is that it does make you feel like a kid again.
Yeah, it does.
And I had that experience when I read it for the first time in high school, and I had that exact same experience reading it now. And I don't think, like, you're not going to read any, like, I guess I haven't read a YA book, but I can't imagine, like, The Hunger Games is going to make me feel like a kid again.
Or, I think The Hunger Games is good. Is a good YA novel. It's just like that is dealing with like more adult. Like this really feels like such like a fair. It feels like a real fairy tale, which is like in the lore of this universe. This really did happen. Mm-hmm. Like it's like in our time. This is a piece of history that really happened.
Like it is a kid's book, but it's not like for kids. It's like kids. No. It's the way that, like, I guess a good comparison would be like Hayao Miyazaki films, like Spirited Away like Howl's Moving Castle. Like, kids can watch that and adults can watch that, and it sort of evokes that same sort of joy and wonder without, sacrificing for accessibility, but also not shying away from some important or intense things while also not, like, wallowing in violence or anything,
Yeah, it's like yeah, that's a really good that's a really good comparison. Or it's like a modern, or it's like Up, It's
like a Pixar movie.
Yeah, like a really good Pixar movie, like an Up or like
Monsters Inc. or Finding Nemo or something.
Yeah, like Finding Nemo, where it's so obviously a kid's movie, but when you watch it, like if you have kids and you watch that, it's like, oh my god, you're like, it's such like a much more heart-pounding adventure than being like, oh, a kid and I'm lost. It's like, no, you're an adult and you've lost your child. Like, imagine how that fucking feels.
Yeah, there's like something there for everyone to enjoy.
Yeah.
And this book and reading The Hobbit, like, made me want to have a child and read them The Hobbit. Like, I know, reading this time around, like, that was such a strong urge.
And I remember reading this book and really like wanting to go on an adventure. Like, I remember that feeling so well, and now reading it now, I'm like, I have gone on adventures since then, and for now I think I'm okay. Just sitting at home, and like I love that. Like,
yeah,
hey, that's the power of books, man.
It's a great it's just a great feeling.
You should read it
because it's like, no one's gonna die, but like Thorin died, and like, and it was emotional, but
it was mostly off screen.
Yeah. It was mostly off screen, and Bilbo got time to grieve it, and it was all sort of okay, and he went home and a little goofy thing happened. Like,
yeah, the moment where Bilbo, he dies and Bilbo just like sits outside the tent and is like weeping, I was like, oh my god, come on, man. Tearjerker. And I gotta tell you, the tone of this book, the difference is fucking crazy between this and the next one.
I'm excited to get into the tone, because I have no idea what I'm in for, because I've never read... I've read this book before, like 10 years ago, but I have not read a single word of
if you
The Lord of the Rings.
If you were reading The Hobbit and you ever said to yourself, God, I wish there were more songs in this, I got good news. There's a lot.
We didn't talk about the songs.
We did not talk about the songs.
Mac, I'm sure you read every line of every song, right?
I do. I sure do. Yes, I do.
I tried. I think I solidly read most of the first couple, and then ever since I was in middle school, I skimmed the songs. I just skimmed the songs.
I read the songs every time. Because I have, and this is, it's a thank God I'm already in a healthy, committed relationship. I have my own can't for all the songs, too.
All the songs?
In The Hobbit, at least. I can't say that for the Lord.
That's crazy.
Well, they all fit like a sort of meter, and I just like have a different thing. Yeah. And some of them I have stolen, obviously, from the Hobbit movie. The one I sang at the beginning of this podcast is the best one ever. The Far
Misty
Over
Mountain,
the Misty Mountains Old. Dude, that song fucking rules.
So you're telling me you have a built-in melody for clap, snap, the black crack, grip, grab.
Yes, I love that one. That's my favorite one.
And down to Goblin Town you go, my lad.
I love that one. That's my favorite one. It's that one and the Misty Mountains one because I just love the idea of like the way Tolkien uses song. Like it's always so happy that when you find out like the bad guys also sing, you're like, no, nothing is sacred. There's some Danylo. This is not a spoiler for me to tell you. You have seen the movies of the Lord of the Rings.
Yes, that's true.
Boromir still dies in the book, but there is maybe the saddest song of all time following the death of Boromir.
I'm gonna skim it.
I think.
No, I won't skim it.
I think it might be. They're described as singing in songs, but to read them as poems. Not like and to imagine them as like them singing, I think does help. But I don't know. I love the songs, and I wish they were in the movies more.
Hey, we don't have to wade through any crazy epigraphs in these books, so I guess I can read a song or two.
There's just great chapter titles. The lost art of actually naming your chapters. This is my big thing for books. Yeah. I fucking love it when chapters have actual names. I love it. It's my favorite thing.
I didn't think about that. I can't think of another book that I've read recently that's like for adults that has had
it's not
chapter names.
It doesn't exist anymore. I mean, like a Song of Ice and Fire has the names of the characters, but I mean that's even like no.
That's just who's talking.
Right.
Yeah, imagine like Hemingway doing chapter titles.
I don't think so. I don't think Hemingway does. I can't actually remember off the top of my head, but I don't think so.
There's no way. There's no Old Man in the Sea where he's like the fish or something.
the man, the sea.
The old.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Hardcover Hooligans podcast. You can follow us at Hardcover Hooligans, Instagram, Facebook, and keep your eyes peeled for on the old TikTok.
We might have some content coming there soon.
If you've heard our takes and you've been like, God, I wish I could put a face to the voice. Well, let's just say
that day
might not be too long. That day may come, and it may be glorious.
Well, if you like this show, please tell your friends and family members, and leave us a review. And Mac, I don't know about you, but this book has really inspired me to auction off all my parents' stuff the next time they're on vacation.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm definitely gonna try to move in and like when they come home be like measuring where I'm gonna put my couch and all that kind of thing. And after I've already bought all their furniture, I'm gonna make them pay me to give it back.
And I mean, will go unsaid, but all their spoons are gonna be gone.
Of course. And if you listener, if you've also never read any of the Lord of the Rings, let's just say it's not the last we see of the Sackville Bagginses.
Nerd.
Well, hey man, you're the one who was fucking trying to convince me a year ago that fucking adium was cool or that 10 powers were.
Oh, that was a different person. I don't know what you're talking about.
He died. He died in he died there and back again. It's your own there and back again.
Oh, I was thinking. Should we have some sort of rating system for the podcast?
Oh, sure.
Like when we rate books. I was thinking it might be funny to rate books in Mistborns.
Oh, that's great.
But it's inverted.
It's reverse.
So it's the fewer Mistborns, the better the book is.
That's awesome. I would give this book, what is it, out of 5 or out of 10? Or out of however many?
I think it's like, we can go, like, the worse the book is, the more Mistborns we give it.
I think I only give this one Mistborn in that it is also a young adult novel. That's the only part of this that reminded me of Mistborn, which is pretty good.
I'd give this half of a Mistborn.
For the same reason?
Yeah, for like, it's old. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of stereotypes in it.
Right. And all these boring songs, man.
God, the Mistborn songs, man. The worst part.